Hello, people of YouTube! I'm Shoko, and today we're watching How Resident Evil Requiem Fixed Yellow Paint by DX. Let's go! DX.
Capcom is on a generational run right now. Their output over the last 10 years in terms of both quality and quantity has been an anomaly across the industry. But what many don't know about is how seriously Capcom takes user feedback and how paramount it's been in their ability to consistently satisfy players.
Oh,
In
I love
addition to
that.
housing project management juggernauts like Jun Takeuchi and veteran creatives like Koshi Nakanishi, the company's success is also due in large part to extensive testing, detailed postmortems, and fan surveys used to gauge what players think needs improvement in their games. This means that, yes, Capcom has been well aware of the highly debated yellow paint, a form of signposting where the developer herds players into the direction.
Hold up, before they had yellow paint, and now they don't? Yo, oh wow, I didn't realize that because this whole entire time I thought they always had no yellow paint when I was playing Requiem, my first ever game.
They want them to go by marking surfaces and objects, largely sparked by Capcom's own titles, which have.
Wait, what does it say? Capcom has been here. How can you tell? Yellow paint.
Titles which have increasingly featured the paint. This topic has become so highly contested that developers around the world publicly debate
Game journalists, when they are forced to play Resident Evil Requiem without yellow paint.
its merits, and even Silent Hill series producer Motoi Okamoto joked that Bloober Team's remake of 2 would not feature yellow paint. Fast forward to today, and I'm happy to say that Capcom has heard everyone loud and clear, and finally released their answer to these criticisms with last month's monstrous launch of Resident Evil Requiem. Today, I want to talk about light and color, about how Resident Evil Requiem masterfully uses both to guide its players through its most tense, shocking, and iconic moments. This is how Resident Evil Requiem fixed yellow paint.
Oh, that's so good.
Like all great gaming franchises, Resident Evil has followed the basic tenets of color, theory, harmony, and context since the very beginning. Just as there's a reason the herbs that heal us are green, there's a reason series-long villain Umbrella is known for its logo segmented with red. Thanks to a combination.
Oh, that's such an indication. Oh, that is so good. They already knew what they were doing. That was DSP Bedfill, yeah. Fun fact, Resident Evil isn't called Resident Evil in Japan, it's called Biohazard! Oh, that's why oh, and then Village, Requiem. I see it, I see.
Of biologic and societal factors, we associate certain colors with feelings of wellness, caution, and fear. This is partially why yellow stands out so much in games. It's meant to act as a striking and attention-grabbing color that contrasts with the greens and reds commonly used to alert players of health or danger. But many gamers argue that it does its job too well, potentially breaking immersion when placed in areas that only serve to assist the player without consideration for how the markings fit into the environment. Others argue that signposting is both a necessity and a long-standing tradition, not just in Resident Evil, but the medium of gaming itself. I think the truth is somewhere in the middle. Signposting has absolutely been around forever, but there are more diegetic or natural ways of guiding players than throwing a bucket of paint at a wall. Resident Evil Requiem has practically no yellow paint. The use of the color yellow remains, but gone are the garish splatters and X's used to denote interactable objects or paths the player is meant to follow. What replaces the yellow paint is a very simple
It's kind of blending in, but simplicity at best. But it's so good because it literally knows the indications just well enough.
pattern of green, yellow, and red, created by lights, stickers, and common objects that are all presented in ways that are immersive but still eye-catching. Requiem trains us to identify its signposting very early by first introducing these colors in a totally normal context. The first use of yellow in the game is this caution tape Grace comes across. We know that police caution tape, at least here in the States, is yellow. This doesn't register as anything out of place, nor does its continued use across the path Grace follows to get to the Wrenwood Hotel. From there, the game does introduce a slightly more gamified use of yellow, but by putting the player into dark interiors, the game can start to use its amazing lighting for signposting as well. Once Grace finds herself in the Rhodes Hill Care Center, Requiem wastes no time in getting you to associate green lights with progression, yellow lights with things that need your attention, and red lights with non-functional obstacles blocking your progress. And you can see all of this in the initial chase with the girl. You'll end up in a room that has a green light, a yellow light, and a red light. The green light leads to safety away from the girl. The yellow light leads to an item, and the red light leads to a dead end. This might be basic.
Yo, I didn't even think about that. I was just like, oh yeah, there's red light over here, so there's a bit of light. But how you doing, Joker Knight? How you doing? Welcome. Thank you so much for the follow.
But it all works because it operates on real-world principles and therefore feels natural to us. It's also how developers teach us without needing text prompts or obvious markings. The rest of the care center is Capcom's masterclass in guiding players with otherwise unassuming objects placed carefully to weave the player through the game's critical path. Did you notice how many lights there are in Rhodes Hill? It's kind of crazy. The player might not notice because a building obviously needs lighting, but there are an absurd amount of lamps. Requiem uses these lamps and sconces to covertly tell us where we need to go to make progress. One of my favorite examples is just past the dining hall. When you enter this door, there's a lamp at the end of the corridor. Once you get there, there's a door lit by an overhead light, and if you look at the stairs, there's another lamp in the corner, and when you reach that, there's a sconce at the top of the stairs. We don't question things that we feel should belong. The yellow paint was so noticeable in games like Resident Evil 4 Remake because it just had no reason to be there. It raised questions that had no logical or in-universe answer. In fact, I used to joke that the same guy who paints everything yellow is the same longtime Capcom employee who removed bodies in the classic games. I think it's amazing that Requiem trusted its players enough to deduce the underlying importance of the colors and its lighting. By using everyday objects for its signposting, the game also didn't need to be very subtle. It could present huge glowing lights that the player knew they'd have to come back to or use at some point, and they weren't an eyesore because the object's placement just made sense among the scenery. Requiem can do this because the first half of the game takes place in buildings at night. It's much easier to use lighting when your environment is abundant in shadows. And that leads us to Leon's more open-ended sections in Raccoon City. How do you do signposting over a much larger space during daytime with faster action-oriented combat? I mentioned Resident Evil 4 Remake, and though it had a fair amount of diegetic signposting, it was simultaneously the straw that broke the camel's back in the yellow paint discourse. It took me a while to understand the challenge that Capcom faced with 4, and how they solved it in Requiem. 4 has too much paint overall, but I think part of the reason why is because the environment limited Capcom's ability to do deliberate lighting. The green, yellow, red pattern of Requiem created by electronic indoor fixtures wouldn't make sense in the countryside of 4. Instead, what signposting there is that isn't paint is usually fire. 4 is also very fast-paced. In action horror, there is less value in subtly highlighting elements like ammo, health, and key items because they're more abundant, and the environment itself is less important to the gameplay than in traditional survival horror. So how'd they marry all of this for Leon sections in Requiem that are more action horror than survival horror like Grace's. Well, the signposting in Leon's levels post Rhodes Hill is a bit more gamified, but the game shows a tremendous amount of restraint, and it makes an effort to blend its use of color into the aesthetic of the now abandoned and desecrated ruins of Raccoon City through both visual and narrative design. Requiem does a good job of preparing the player to see things that wouldn't have existed in the Raccoon City of 1998. It tells us that the BSAA and other organizations have traveled into Raccoon City since the bomb dropped, so coming across modern containers and other items that don't look 30 years old is mentally accepted. On the color side of things, only certain ladders now are yellow, usually those in combat arenas where the player will need to quickly discern where to go. Otherwise, they're normal. Interactable vehicles have yellow latches, and all boxes contain yellow fragile stickers, but that was established at the start of the game, and they still don't look super out of place. The game has some yellow ropes you need to shoot too, but even those have some logical appearance. I get the feeling that Capcom did not want to jeopardize the spectacle of being back in Raccoon City by doing too much overt signposting. For many,
No, that makes so much more sense. Because it really just matches exactly the environment. It's more logical with all the sense of colors. And all the indications are not over the top. They're just like naturally part of it. It just looks so good, cohesive. Plus, I love the rubble. I like the dirt. I like how used and abused everything looks.
part of the appeal of Requiem is going back and seeing a post-apocalyptic version of it. You want to explore the city, and yellow paint could have ruined that because it makes it very obvious where the critical path lies. You can really see this in the RPD. That section is all about vibes. There's no combat, and Requiem seems aware that the player doesn't want to know where to go, because what they want to do is explore. Resident Evil's maps are characters in and of themselves, and stepping foot into the RPD again carries a nostalgia and emotional weight to it that Capcom handled perfectly by just letting us exist in the space without telling us where to go. The RPD would have been the least logical place to put too much new signposting, and not overindulging is just one of many ways Requiem shows that Capcom really did understand the complaints about the paint. Once Leon is back in a closed-off area, Requiem does fall back on using lighting and level design to help the player navigate. This is seen in the Raccoon City Underground and culminates when Leon and Grace
Oh, this one's so good when it goes into this. This is how you appeal to all the people. Yeah, it goes to everybody, 100%.
arrive at the Ark. The Ark is Requiem showing off, frankly. The game continues its pattern of green, yellow, red, and it does so superbly that it even sees use in the game's cinematics. The signposting in the Ark is baked into the architecture. It's a high-tech facility, not necessarily beholden to the visuals of everyday life. This affords it a unique stylization opportunity that it seizes immediately. It uses green and red again to signify progress or obstacle, but the doors themselves are the source of the lights, so you always know where to go or where you need to return to with a key item. Since wooden crates with fragile stickers would look out of place with the almost futuristic aesthetic of the Ark, the game introduces these 2005 PC looking crates that glow yellow. It feels like the Ark was streamlined because it's a space that both Grace and Leon have to traverse, and Capcom did a fantastic job making sure that the game delivered a consistent atmosphere across both playstyles. Where previous games that have attempted mixing action and survival horror have fallen a bit flat or seeing clear break-off points for each style, Requiem tackled this problem by staging a level that both of its main characters could feasibly exist in and explore without it being too fast for survival horror or too slow for action horror. Since the Ark has no obligation to conventional lighting, Requiem goes all out with its use of color here, like in the fight with Hunk that takes place in a pungent red, with the Grim Reaper himself making a surprise surprise appearance, this oppressive lighting fits him perfectly and tells us that he is a real threat. Lickers are also encased in a glossy crimson that stands out from the sterile white of the Ark. But my favorite use of color in this
you can break them out by shooting them by accident. I did not know that. I'm so glad I never shot them by accident.
part of the game are easily the yellows. Requiem's final cutscenes are drenched in yellow, and they give the finale a feeling of uncertainty. Red would have been too strong. I don't think Capcom wanted us to feel danger here. I think they wanted suspense. Will Leon survive? Who is Xeno? What is Elpis?
It's like the uncertainty about what's gonna happen. It really gives that mystery feeling, especially when he's walking down the hall and you don't know what's gonna happen to him. You just don't know.
I'd go as far as to say that this is the most nail-biting cutscene in a Resident Evil game. The franchise is obviously known for its ability to terrorize its players, but I've never been more unsure of what was going to happen in a scene in these games than this one. After Requiem answers the questions it spent the entire game crafting, the game drops us from suspenseful yellows to cool blues for the final boss fight. And then, at the very end, it does something fascinating. To instill a sense of hopelessness, it turns off the lights. No red, no yellow, no color.
I guess this is it then.
Until there is, and
you really think it's gonna end, and they're stuck down there forever. I love the moment of heroicness, the moment where they get saved, the moment where they actually survive. They really came in with like a twist at the end, like, nope, psych, we just played you.
Maki Machini follows.
How you doing, Maki Machini? Welcome. Thank you so much for the follow.
we know with certainty that both Leon and Grace will be alright, and that the game is coming to a close. It's incredible how much we can infer and how moved we can be by the use of light. Resident Evil Requiem marks a milestone for Capcom in its use of it to marionette the emotions of its players and to finally address one of the more common complaints about its recent games. Signposting isn't a bad thing. One's inability to recognize it doesn't mean it isn't present, and while I do share the sentiment that the yellow paint was too much, Requiem's solution presents a happy medium that has the advantage of also enhancing the game's presentation as it reaches for the player's attention. At the center of this debate has always been the increasing realism in game fidelity. With the more realistic games have become, there's been a greater need for signposting to decipher player items and progression in complex environments. Gone are the days when you could easily tell a 3D object apart from a pre-rendered background. There has also been a push to make gaming more accessible, which has resulted in some of the rougher edges of the medium and Resident Evil's gameplay specifically being smoothed out to accommodate a larger audience. Requiem, however, feels like a pivot in the right direction in more ways than just how it approaches signposting. For example, something I disliked about the newest remakes was them locking off ink ribbons to hardcore difficulty, and lo and behold, Requiem has a standard difficulty mode where you can use them. Capcom isn't perfect, no studio or publisher is, but they often listen, and their success over the past decade has largely come from understanding the audience for the games they create. And that's especially difficult because the wants of the player change over time. But because Capcom is so on top of gathering player feedback, their developers can have informed conversations about how to improve their games. The eradication of yellow paint is just the latest example of this, and I suspect this has also come as a result of the proliferation of ray tracing and other lighting technologies that are becoming standard across game engines. Requiem is one of the best looking games I've played in recent memory, and it proves that the best way to stylize realism has, and always will be, light and color. Thanks for watching.
Yeah, that makes sense though. If it's gonna be cinematic, especially games, they're becoming more story driven or movie driven where they're trying to become something good. That's kind of where it's setting itself up for. I really like that. I was playing without sound while trying to get B-roll. Yeah, that lady always scared me. I hope you guys enjoyed the video as much as I did. Like, comment, share, subscribe, and we'll see each other next time. Bye-bye.